The cold fluorescent light of the hospital room flickered above Elena Carter as she sat trembling on the edge of the bed. Her hands clutched her stomach, her tears streaming down her pale cheeks. She was 3 months pregnant. For her, this child was not just life inside her womb. It was hope, love, and the dream of a family she had longed for. But tonight, that dream was about to be ripped away. Her husband, Adrien Carter, stood tall by the doorway, his jaw clenched in arrogance, not in worry. At his side, Cassandra Vale, his glamorous young mistress, smirked with satisfaction. Adrien's voice was sharp, cold, slicing through Elena's fragile heart. "Sign the consent form, Elena. End this pregnancy. It's time you stop living in a fantasy. Cassandra is my future, not you." Elena's lips trembled. "Adrien, this is our child. How can you say that? I gave you everything. I gave up my career, my independence, my dreams, for us, for you." But Adrien only laughed bitterly. "You gave me nothing but problems. You can't even give me the image I deserve. A weak wife, sickly, clinging to me like a burden. Cassandra is everything you are not. Beautiful, ambitious, worthy of standing beside me. Do you think a baby will change that? No. If you want any dignity left, you will do what I say." Cassandra stepped closer, her perfume filling the room like poison. She placed a manicured hand on Adrien's arm and whispered loud enough for Elena to hear. "She'll be fine after this. She just needs to accept reality. Don't worry, darling. I'll give you children when the time is right." The words pierced Elena like knives. Her sobs grew heavier, her chest heaving with pain. "This is my baby, our baby. Please, Adrien, don't make me do this." But Adrien's eyes were hard, merciless. "You either sign, or I walk away tonight and leave you with nothing. You are nothing without me, Elena. Don't forget that." The pen shook in her hand as the nurse waited silently. Her heart screamed to protect the little life inside her, but the crushing weight of betrayal and fear pinned her down. She looked up one last time, hoping to find even a flicker of compassion in Adrien's eyes, but found only contempt. Her tears blurred the paper as her name bled across the page. At that moment, Elena Carter felt her world collapse. She wasn't just losing her child, she was losing herself. And yet, in the deepest corner of her soul, a spark refused to die. A spark that whispered, "This is not the end. One day, they will regret everything they've done to you." The door slammed shut behind Adrien and Cassandra, but neither of them knew the truth, that Elena Carter's story was only beginning. Before she was broken in that cold hospital room, Elena Carter had been a woman full of warmth, hope, and quiet strength. She was 29 years old, with soft brown eyes that carried both kindness and determination. To the outside world, she was nothing more than a modest assistant at a local publishing firm, living in a rented apartment and wearing second-hand dresses. She blended into the crowd, a face that many would overlook. But what no one knew, not even her husband, was that Elena was far from ordinary. Born Elena Sinclair, she was the only daughter of the late Richard Sinclair, a billionaire whose vast empire stretched across finance, real estate, and technology. But Elena's childhood had not been one of lavish parties and golden palaces. Her mother, Catherine, had insisted on raising her away from the glittering cage of wealth. "Money is not love, Elena. You must learn to live as if it means nothing," Catherine often said. So while her father's empire grew, Elena attended public schools, lived in a modest suburban home with her mother, and never flaunted the Sinclair name. When Catherine died suddenly in a car accident, Elena's world turned upside down. She was 22 and heartbroken. That was when her estranged father revealed the truth. She was the sole heir to the Sinclair fortune. Billions rested in her name. But instead of embracing the empire, Elena made a radical choice. She put everything into a blind trust, hid her identity, and tried to live an ordinary life. She longed for love, not power. She wanted someone who would see her, not her fortune. That was when she met Adrien Carter. He was charming, ambitious, with a smile that could melt the coldest heart. He treated Elena as if she was the most precious woman in the world. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt safe. She believed she had found the one man who loved her for who she was, not what she owned. When he proposed, she didn't hesitate. Against her father's warnings, against her lawyer's pleas, she became Adrien's wife. In the beginning, life was sweet. They lived in a small apartment, shared late-night takeout meals, laughed over cheap wine, and made plans for the future. Adrien promised her the world, and Elena believed him. She worked tirelessly, supporting his career while putting aside her own dreams. She clipped coupons, took double shifts, and endured his growing impatience with her lack of ambition. She thought love meant sacrifice. But slowly, the cracks began to show. Adrien's charm turned into cruelty. His ambition became greed. He mocked her for being too plain, too weak, too dependent. Yet Elena held on, telling herself he was just stressed, that success would soften him again. When she discovered she was pregnant, she thought everything would change. She imagined Adrien would hold her hand, talk to the baby, and finally see her worth. Instead, the pregnancy became the weapon he used to destroy her. What Elena never expected was the humiliation that followed. Adrien, desperate to elevate his image, flaunted Cassandra in public while whispering to Elena that she was nothing. And worse, he began leaking poisonous rumors to the media. The story spread like wildfire. Elena Carter mentally unstable, unfit to be a mother. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors whispered behind her back. She became the villain in her own tragedy. Elena sat alone many nights, staring out at the city lights, clutching her stomach, praying for a miracle. She wanted to believe love could survive betrayal. But as the lies spread and the cruelty deepened, something inside her shifted. The timid girl who gave up her power for love was slowly dying. In her place, something stronger, sharper, and more dangerous was being born. And while Adrien and Cassandra thought they had crushed her, they had unknowingly awakened the heiress of an empire, an heiress who would rise from the ashes. The life Elena once knew, the cramped apartment with peeling paint, the small kitchen where she cooked cheap pasta for Adrien, was gone. After the hospital incident, she retreated into silence, disappearing from the public eye. The world thought she had broken down, swallowed whole by grief and shame. Adrien and Cassandra flaunted their new life openly, parading through glittering parties as if Elena never existed. Newspapers and gossip blogs declared Cassandra the future Mrs. Carter. Elena was branded a ghost, a forgotten wife who had crumbled under the weight of rejection. But while they thrived in the spotlight, Elena's story was shifting behind closed doors. Her late father's lawyers, loyal to the Sinclair bloodline, had never abandoned her. When she finally answered their calls, they revealed what Adrien and Cassandra never imagined. Elena's trust fund had matured. Billions in assets, real estate, tech companies, international banks were hers to control. Though Adrien thought he had stripped her of everything, Elena held a silent, untouchable empire. At first, the idea of wealth made her sick. She didn't want revenge. She wanted the simple life she had dreamed of. A husband, a child, a home filled with laughter. But every memory of Adrien's cold voice, every whisper of Cassandra's cruel smirk, hardened her heart. The timid Elena, who once accepted humiliation, was gone. What remained was an heiress learning how to wield power. Victor Blackwell, her father's former business partner, stepped into her life at just the right moment. He was a commanding presence, a billionaire CEO known for his ruthless strategies and his protective loyalty to the Sinclair family. Where Adrien dismissed her as fragile, Victor saw her potential. "You've been underestimated your entire life," he told her in his private penthouse overlooking Manhattan. "It's time you stop living small, Elena. Time to step into the world that belongs to you." She hesitated, but Victor guided her gently. He introduced her to the boardrooms where fortunes were decided, the gala halls where reputations were made, the private meetings where alliances formed like storms. Elena, once invisible, began to shine. She traded her modest clothes for sleek gowns, her trembling voice for calm authority. She studied, practiced, learned how to hold her ground among men twice her age who had once dismissed her as Adrien Carter's wife. The transformation was slow but powerful. She attended charity events, speaking about women's dignity and resilience. She toured her companies discreetly, showing compassion for workers and vision for the future. The press began to notice. The fragile wife who had disappeared was now re-emerging with quiet grace. Rumors swirled of a powerful heiress reclaiming her place, but few realized it was Elena Carter, the same woman Adrien had abandoned. Meanwhile, Adrien basked in his illusions. He strutted across ballrooms, his hand glued to Cassandra's waist, laughing at whispers about his ex-wife's downfall. "She's nothing without me," he boasted to investors, certain Elena would one day come crawling back. Cassandra, though smiling in public, began to feel the chill of doubt. She had clawed her way to Adrien's side, but why did the thought of Elena's return leave her restless at night? The stage was being set. Adrien and Cassandra lived in luxury, believing they had won. Elena, cloaked in silence, was preparing for her rebirth. And the arena where their fates would collide was already chosen. A glittering charity gala that promised champagne, cameras, and scandal under crystal chandeliers. What Adrien didn't know was that the woman he discarded in shame would soon walk into that same ballroom, not as his broken wife, but as the heiress of an empire. Elena Carter had mastered the art of deception. To the public, he was a rising star in the corporate world, a man with charm, ambition, and a glittering future. He appeared on magazine covers, his sharp tuxedo and confident smile painting the picture of success. But behind the polished image was arrogance, cruelty, and an insatiable hunger for power. Every night, Adrien and Cassandra Vale paraded their relationship through the city's most exclusive venues. Cassandra, barely 26, was the kind of woman who thrived under flashing lights. With raven hair that shimmered under chandeliers and designer gowns hugging her curves, she basked in attention. To her, Adrien wasn't just a lover, he was a ticket to a life she had always coveted. Together, they were a scandal dressed as glamour. At rooftop parties, they clinked champagne glasses, laughing too loudly, whispering insults about Elena to those who would listen. She was weak, Adrien would sneer, his arm around Cassandra's waist. She couldn't keep up with me. She couldn't even handle being a wife. And Cassandra would nod sweetly, adding with a smirk, "Some women just aren't built for greatness." Their cruelty wasn't hidden, it was broadcasted. They wanted the world to believe Elena was finished, irrelevant. Adrien leaked stories to the press about his ex-wife's mental instability, while Cassandra posed for paparazzi in Elena's old jewelry, flaunting trophies of another woman's life. But Adrien's arrogance reached far beyond gossip. He was reckless in business too. Flush with confidence, he gambled company funds on risky deals, believing Cassandra's presence made him untouchable. "Investors trust me because of the image we project," he boasted one evening, sipping bourbon in his penthouse. "They see a man who traded up, a man who doesn't settle for weakness." Yet cracks were forming. Whispers circulated among board members. Adrien was spending more than he earned. Deals weren't delivering. Investors were uneasy. But Adrien brushed it off, blinded by pride. Cassandra reassured him, "Don't worry, darling, they worship you. And when we're married, they'll worship us both." Still, Cassandra wasn't immune to fear. She noticed Adrien's temper, how quickly his charm soured into rage when things didn't go his way. She noticed how often his eyes drifted toward wealthier women at galas, calculating their worth like commodities. For the first time, doubt crept into her heart. Was she really his forever, or just another stepping stone? But Adrien's cruelty wasn't reserved only for Elena or the business world. Behind closed doors, Cassandra too felt his dominance. He controlled what she wore, how she spoke, even how she laughed. "You're mine," he told her more than once, gripping her wrist just a little too tightly. And though Cassandra smiled in public, a flicker of fear sometimes shadowed her eyes. Still, she clung to him, because leaving meant returning to obscurity, and Cassandra Vale refused to vanish into the shadows. She would endure his temper, his arrogance, anything, so long as she remained by his side when the cameras flashed. Adrien, meanwhile, reveled in the illusion of victory. To him, Elena was gone, destroyed. He never imagined she was preparing to return, not as the fragile wife he discarded, but as a force powerful enough to shatter his empire. The city glittered around him, but Adrien didn't see the storm approaching. He believed he was untouchable, a king with his queen beside him. What he didn't know was that his throne was built on lies. And soon, the woman he crushed would walk into his kingdom and burn it to the ground. The night of the Bright Horizons charity gala was supposed to be a celebration of generosity. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, a string quartet filled the air with elegant music, and the city's wealthiest mingled in gowns and tuxedos worth more than most people's homes. Cameras flashed with every arrival, catching smiles that often hid secrets. Among the most anticipated guests was Elena Carter. The press adored him, at least the version of him they believed in. Tonight he arrived at the grand marble steps of the hotel with Cassandra Vale on his arm. The sight sent ripples of whispers through the crowd. She wore a scarlet gown that clung to her like flame, while Adrien basked in the glow of her beauty, as if parading a prize. Reporters swarmed them. "Mr. Carter, where's your wife?" someone shouted. Adrien smirked, squeezing Cassandra's hand. "I only bring women who deserve to be seen," he replied loudly, ensuring every microphone caught it. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Cassandra leaned in, her voice dripping with honey. "Some women are born to shine, others to fade." Inside the ballroom, guests whispered. The scandal of Adrien's discarded wife was no secret. Elena Carter had become a punchline in hushed conversations. "She was too fragile," one woman muttered behind a jeweled fan. "He upgraded," another man chuckled, eyeing Cassandra with approval. The cruelty of their words was sharp, but none cut deeper than Adrien's own. As the evening progressed, Adrien took the stage to deliver his speech. He spoke of innovation, success, and the future, words that dripped with self-congratulation. Then, as if the humiliation wasn't enough, he delivered the blow meant for Elena. "Success demands strength," he announced, his voice booming across the ballroom. "That's why I surround myself with people like Cassandra. Not everyone can handle the pressure. Some people crumble, some people break." The crowd laughed politely, understanding the cruel subtext. He wasn't talking about some people, he was talking about Elena. What Adrien didn't know was that Elena was there. She had come quietly, unannounced, dressed in a simple black gown that drew little attention. Her presence was not for glamour, but for closure. She had wanted to see the man who once promised her forever, to witness the depths of his betrayal with her own eyes. But as she stood in the shadows, hearing his voice twist her pain into entertainment, her heart shattered all over again. She clutched her clutch bag tightly, her knuckles white. Every fiber of her body screamed at her to leave, to run far from the cruelty. But she stayed. She needed to see. She needed to feel the fire that would fuel her transformation. As Adrien and Cassandra descended the stage, bathed in applause, a reporter called out again. "What about Elena, Mr. Carter? Do you think she'll ever come back?" Adrien laughed, the sound cold and sharp. "Elena? She's finished. If she hasn't begged me to take her back yet, she soon will. Women like her can't survive on their own. She'll crawl back, mark my words." The ballroom erupted in laughter. Cameras flashed, capturing Cassandra's victorious smile as she leaned against Adrien's chest. In that moment, Elena's tears burned hotter than fire. She turned and slipped out into the night, her heart bleeding but her spirit awakening. The humiliation was complete. The man she loved had turned her into a joke for the world. What neither Adrien nor Cassandra realized was that the woman they mocked had just made a silent vow. She would rise again, and when she did, the world would laugh at them instead. The echo of laughter from the gala still rang in Elena's ears as she stumbled into the night. The cold air bit her skin, but she barely noticed. Her heels clicked against the pavement, uneven, frantic, until she found herself alone on a deserted street, away from the glitter and glamour that had just mocked her existence. She leaned against a stone wall, clutching her stomach as if the memory of her lost child still lived inside her, and finally let the sobs pour out. She cried like a woman shattered. Not the elegant tears of a socialite, but raw, broken wails that no one came to comfort. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks, her body shaking from the force of grief. For years, she had endured Adrien's cruelty quietly, believing silence was strength. But tonight, hearing him laugh at her pain, hearing strangers mock her as if she were nothing, it broke something inside her. When she reached her small apartment, the loneliness was suffocating. The space was dark, cold, filled with memories of a life she thought she was building with Adrien. Their photos still hung on the wall, smiling faces, holding hands, a love that was never real. She tore them down, one by one, until the floor was littered with broken glass and ripped frames. Then she collapsed onto the couch, her body curling into itself like a child, and whispered into the silence, "Why wasn't I enough?" The days that followed blurred together. She didn't eat, she barely slept. She ignored calls from her lawyer, from Victor, from anyone who tried to reach her. The gossip columns were relentless. Stories of Adrien and Cassandra's romance filled her newsfeed, accompanied by cruel captions comparing her to Cassandra. From wife to ghost, one headline sneered. Carter trades weakness for ambition, another read. Each article stabbed her deeper, dragging her further into despair. Her health deteriorated. She grew pale, thin, her eyes hollow. Once, she fainted in the shower, waking up hours later on the bathroom floor. She thought about ending it, about slipping quietly out of a world that no longer wanted her. She imagined the peace of silence, the release from humiliation. But then, in her darkest hour, she remembered her mother's words. Money is not love, Elena, but it can protect you. Use it if you must. That memory stopped her. She realized that while Adrien had taken her dignity, he had not taken her inheritance. The empire her father left still existed, waiting for her to claim it. The thought terrified her. She didn't feel like a queen or even a survivor. She felt broken. But beneath the despair was a spark, a whisper that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't finished yet. One night, after weeks of silence, she forced herself to rise. She stood before the mirror, barely recognizing the pale, gaunt woman staring back. Her eyes, though swollen from tears, carried a new depth. She was not dead. Not yet. Her phone buzzed on the table. Another call from Victor Blackwell. She hesitated, then answered with a trembling hand. His voice was steady, firm. Elena, enough hiding. If you don't stand, Adrien will win forever. You are stronger than this. Meet me tomorrow. It's time. She closed her eyes, her heart pounding. Could she rise from the ashes of her despair? Could she transform her pain into power? For the first time in weeks, Elena whispered a single word into the darkness. Yes. The next morning, Elena walked into the penthouse office of Victor Blackwell. The city skyline stretched endlessly behind him, but all she could see was his piercing gaze. He rose from his chair as if he'd been waiting years for this moment. You came, he said simply. Elena nodded. Her body was still weak, but her spirit had shifted. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't drowning in grief. She was searching for answers. Victor gestured for her to sit. On the mahogany desk between them lay a thick leather folder, its gold seal embossed with a name she hadn't spoken aloud in years. Sinclair Holdings. Her heart skipped. Elena, Victor began, his voice deliberate. You are not just Adrien Carter's discarded wife. You are Elena Sinclair, the rightful heir to one of the most powerful empires in this country. And it's time you take it back. Her breath caught. She had tried so hard to bury that truth, to live as a normal woman who could be loved for herself. But the reality of her bloodline was undeniable. Billions in assets, control of international corporations, political influence, the kind of power Adrien could never dream of. Elena shook her head. I don't know if I can. I'm not like my father. I don't belong in boardrooms. Victor leaned forward, his eyes burning with conviction. You've already survived the worst betrayal a woman can face. You are stronger than you think. Your father trusted me with this folder. He told me, when she's ready, give her the keys. These are the documents that make you majority shareholder of Sinclair Holdings. Adrien can't touch this. No one can. Unless you let them. Her trembling hands reached for the folder. Inside, she found stock certificates, property deeds, and a letter in her father's handwriting. My dearest Elena, I gave you a quiet life because your mother wanted it for you. But I always knew the day would come when you would need your inheritance, not for luxury, but for survival. Use it wisely. Protect yourself. Never let anyone convince you that you are less than who you are. You are a Sinclair. You are my daughter. Tears blurred her vision, but these weren't tears of despair. They were tears of awakening. She clutched the letter to her chest, feeling her father's presence as if he were standing beside her. Victor's voice cut through her thoughts. Adrien believes you are powerless. He thinks he destroyed you. That is his mistake. With these assets, you are untouchable. But Elena, this isn't just about survival anymore. It's about justice. You have the chance to take back your dignity and to take everything he values most. Her mind raced. For so long, she had been the woman begging for scraps of love. Now, for the first time, she saw a different future. A future where she wasn't chasing Adrien's approval, but standing above him. Elena closed the folder with trembling hands. If I take this path, there's no turning back. Victor nodded. Exactly. The question is, do you want revenge or do you want redemption? Her chest rose with a deep breath. She thought of Adrien's mocking laughter, Cassandra's cruel smirk, the whispers of strangers calling her weak. She thought of the child she lost and the woman she had been. Slowly she lifted her chin. I want both, she said. Victor smiled, The kind of smile that meant the game had just begun. Then let's give Adrien Carter the surprise of his life. What Elena didn't yet know was that Adrien was already scheming to steal what he didn't realize she owned, and the battlefield was about to be bloodier than either of them expected. The days that followed were unlike anything Elena Carter had ever known. Gone were the quiet mornings of self-pity and the sleepless nights of despair. Under Victor Blackwell's guidance, her life became a relentless training ground. Victor was not gentle, but he was fair. He pushed Elena into rooms where billion-dollar deals were dissected, where men twice her age sneered at her presence. At first she trembled when she spoke. Her voice cracked, her palms sweated. She stumbled over figures and forgot names. The board members smirked, whispering that Adrien's ex-wife was trying too hard to play heiress. But Victor never let her quit. Look them in the eye, he would demand after each meeting. Your weakness is the lie they told you. You are not weak, Elena. You are Sinclair blood. Act like it. So she kept showing up. Day after day, meeting after meeting, gala after gala. She studied late into the night, poring over reports, learning the language of power, the currency of influence, the art of negotiation, the weapon of silence. Slowly, her fear began to fade. Her wardrobe changed too. No longer did she hide in muted dresses that blended into the background. Victor's team of stylists dressed her in sleek suits, tailored gowns, and subtle jewelry that whispered authority. When she walked into a room now, conversations paused, heads turned. The same men who once dismissed her as Adrien's broken wife now struggled to meet her gaze. But transformation wasn't only external. Elena's spirit hardened. She no longer flinched at the mention of Adrien's name. She no longer replayed the cruel laughter from the gala in her mind. Instead, she envisioned a different scene. Adrien's downfall, Cassandra's silence, and her own victory. That vision fueled her every step. Still, it wasn't easy. There were nights she collapsed on her bed, exhausted, wondering if she was fooling herself. One evening, she confessed her fears to Victor. What if I'm not enough? What if I fail and prove Adrien right? Victor's reply was sharp. Failure isn't the enemy, Elena. Fear is. And you've already survived worse than fear. You lost a child. You lost love. You lost yourself. But here you are. Still breathing. Still fighting. That makes you more powerful than anyone in Adrien's world. His words burned into her, lighting a fire she hadn't felt before. Her first true test came at a private investors' dinner. Adrien was there, Cassandra draped across his arm as usual. He didn't notice Elena at first. But when she entered the room in a midnight blue gown, shoulders straight, eyes steady, the air shifted. Conversations faltered, cameras turned, Adrien's smile froze. Elena? He muttered under his breath, his grip on Cassandra tightening. But Elena didn't flinch. She walked past him as though he were invisible, greeting board members with a poise that stunned them. For the first time, Adrien wasn't the center of the room. She was. That night, she sealed her first deal on her own, securing an investment for Sinclair Holdings that even Victor admitted he couldn't have done better. The board applauded her. Adrien seethed. Cassandra whispered venom into his ear. Back in her penthouse, Elena stood before the mirror, studying the reflection that stared back. She was no longer the broken wife begging for love. She was a woman rising, a woman preparing for battle. And though Adrien still believed she was a ghost of the past, Elena knew the truth. She was coming for him, and nothing would stop her. Adrien Carter thrived on attention. To him, every gala, every business dinner, every press interview was a stage where he played the leading man. And ever since Elena's quiet disappearance, he felt invincible. The gossip columns painted him as a rising star with a dazzling new partner. Cassandra Vale clung to his arm like jewelry, her beauty polishing his image. To the outside world, they looked unstoppable. But whispers of Elena's reappearance were beginning to circulate. Some said she'd been spotted at exclusive events, standing beside Victor Blackwell himself. Others whispered that she was quietly moving in business circles, signing deals under the Sinclair name. Adrien scoffed at the rumors. To him, Elena was broken beyond repair. At a lavish investors' party hosted in the penthouse of a Wall Street tycoon, Adrien decided to set the record straight. Surrounded by champagne glasses and city views glittering through floor-to-ceiling windows, he basked in the admiration of his guests. Cassandra laughed on cue at his jokes, her manicured hand resting proudly on his chest. One of the investors leaned in, smirking. So Adrien, rumor has it your ex-wife is making waves again. Is she really working with Blackwell? That's unexpected. The room chuckled, curious. Adrien raised his glass of scotch, his eyes gleaming with arrogance. Elena, please, don't be fooled by whispers. She's fragile. She was always fragile. Do you know how many times she cried herself to sleep because she couldn't handle pressure? A woman like that doesn't survive long in our world. Blackwell is probably entertaining her out of pity. The crowd laughed. Cassandra leaned closer, her lips brushing Adrien's ear. Tell them the truth, darling, she purred. Adrien smirked wider, his voice carrying across the room. Mark my words. Elena will crawl back. Women like her always do. She doesn't have the strength to live without me. Sooner or later, she'll beg me to take her back. And when she does, maybe I'll be generous enough to let her. The laughter was cruel, sharp, echoing against the marble walls. Every chuckle was another knife stabbing into Elena's dignity, though she wasn't even in the room. Adrien basked in it, convinced of his own power. But what he didn't know was that Elena had been invited to that very party. She hadn't planned to step into the spotlight yet, but fate had other plans. Standing just beyond the balcony doors, hidden in the shadows, she heard every poisonous word. Her chest tightened, her nails digging into her palm as rage coursed through her veins. This wasn't the first time Adrien mocked her, but tonight was different. Tonight, she wasn't the broken wife silently absorbing his cruelty. She was the heiress of Sinclair Holdings. She had power, resources, and allies. And she had a burning need for justice. As Adrien raised his glass, toasting to his own arrogance, Elena stepped forward from the shadows. Conversations faltered, the air shifted. Guests turned their heads, surprised, murmuring her name in disbelief. Adrien froze, his smirk stiffening into shock. Cassandra's hand slipped from his arm. Elena's eyes locked on him, calm but unyielding. Her voice, steady and strong, cut through the stunned silence. Careful, Adrien, she said, her lips curling into the faintest smile. Sometimes the women you think will crawl are the ones who will make you kneel. The room gasped, flashes from paparazzi cameras exploding like fireworks. And in that single moment, Adrien Carter realized his joke had just turned into his greatest threat. For Cassandra Vale, life had been a game of survival. She wasn't born into wealth, but she had clawed her way into the spotlight with ambition sharper than any diamond she wore. Being Adrien Carter's mistress had once felt like her greatest victory. She was the woman who won, the woman who stole the billionaire from his fragile wife. Or so she believed. But ever since Elena stepped back into the picture, Cassandra's victories felt hollow. The party confrontation replayed in her mind on a loop. Elena's entrance had been like a storm, controlled, elegant, terrifying. The way Adrien froze at the sight of her, the way the crowd shifted their attention instantly from Cassandra to Elena, it left a bitter taste in Cassandra's mouth. For the first time she felt invisible, overshadowed. Back in Adrien's penthouse, Cassandra paced the marble floor in her red silk robe, her arms crossed tightly. Adrien poured himself another glass of whiskey, scowling. Don't let her get to you, he muttered. She's weak, always has been. But Cassandra wasn't convinced. Weak? She snapped. Did you see her tonight? That wasn't weakness. That was power. She wasn't the same woman you humiliated, Adrien. She looked like someone who could destroy us. Adrien waved his hand dismissively. She's playing dress-up. Blackwell is feeding her confidence, but she'll crumble soon enough. Trust me. Elena can't survive without me. Cassandra bit her lip, unease gnawing at her. She had seen that confidence before, not in Elena, but in powerful women who ruled boardrooms and crushed rivals with a smile. And Elena had that same aura now. Cassandra hated to admit it, but Adrien was wrong. Elena was no longer desperate. She was dangerous. The fear grew sharper days later, when Cassandra overheard a conversation at a boutique. Two socialites whispered near the dressing room. They say Elena Sinclair is back. Can you imagine, the heiress of Sinclair Holdings all this time? Cassandra's heart skipped. Heiress? Sinclair? She rushed home, her mind spinning. She searched online, and there it was. Articles connecting Elena to Sinclair Holdings, whispers of her inheritance, photos of her standing beside Victor Blackwell. Cassandra's chest tightened. She realized she had been wrong all along. Elena wasn't just back. She had more power than either of them. That night, Cassandra confronted Adrien, her voice trembling. "Did you know she was a Sinclair? Did you know she had that kind of money?" Adrien's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. His face paled, but his voice remained cold. "She's bluffing. There's no way she has control. Even if she does, I'll find a way to take it from her." But Cassandra heard the fear beneath his bravado. For the first time, Adrien didn't sound untouchable. He sounded desperate. She lay awake that night beside him, staring at the ceiling. Doubt clawed at her chest. She had sacrificed everything for this man, her reputation, her dignity, her name. And what if he wasn't the savior she thought? What if Adrien was nothing more than a sinking ship, dragging her down with him? The next morning, Cassandra slipped into the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at her reflection. The glamorous mistress who once smirked with victory now looked haunted. She whispered to herself, "I chose the wrong side." Her phone buzzed on the counter. A message appeared from an unknown number. "We know Adrien's secrets. If you're smart, you'll switch sides. Meet me tonight, alone." Cassandra's hands shook as she read the text, because deep down she knew the message wasn't a trap. It was a lifeline. The Metropolitan Crown Hotel had never looked more radiant. Chandeliers sparkled like frozen stars, a red carpet stretched across marble steps, and photographers lined the entrance, cameras flashing like lightning. It was the night of the annual Unity Gala, the most prestigious event of the season, a gathering where billionaires, politicians, and celebrities mingled under one roof. Deals were sealed with handshakes, reputations were built with smiles, and secrets were whispered in dark corners. For Adrien Carter, this was his kingdom. He arrived in a black tailored tuxedo, every detail of his appearance polished to perfection. At his side, Cassandra Vale glittered in a silver gown that caught the light with every step. Her diamond necklace sparkled, but her smile was forced, strained beneath the weight of growing fear. Still, she clung to Adrien's arm, playing her role as his glamorous consort. Reporters swarmed. Mr. Carter, one shouted. "What do you say about rumors your wife is back in society?" Adrien smirked, tightening his grip on Cassandra. "Rumors are just that, rumors. Elena is gone. Tonight is about the future, not ghosts from the past." The crowd laughed, charmed by his confidence. Cassandra forced a smile, though her stomach twisted. She knew better now. Elena wasn't gone. She was waiting. Inside the grand ballroom, music floated from a live orchestra, the scent of roses and expensive champagne filling the air. Adrien moved through the crowd like a king, shaking hands, making promises, drawing eyes wherever he went. Cassandra played her part, laughing at jokes, whispering in his ear, pretending not to notice the sidelong glances and hushed whispers that followed them. But there was an unease in the room tonight. Conversations stopped and started with unnatural rhythm, as though guests were waiting for something or someone. Cassandra felt it too, the electricity in the air, the sense that the night was building toward an explosion. At their table near the stage, Adrien raised his glass, his voice loud enough for nearby guests to hear, to moving forward, to leaving weakness behind. His words dripped with poison, a clear jab at Elena. A ripple of laughter moved through the group. Cassandra's smile faltered. She scanned the ballroom nervously, half expecting Elena to appear at any moment. And then, the doors opened. Every head turned. Every whisper stopped. There she was, Elena. She stepped into the room in a gown of deep emerald silk, her posture regal, her expression calm. Diamonds sparkled at her ears, but it was not the jewelry that silenced the room. It was her presence. She no longer looked like a broken wife or a ghost of the past. She looked like power incarnate. Photographers surged, flashes exploding as her name raced through the crowd. "Elena Sinclair!" Someone shouted. Gasps followed. The heiress. The truth was out. Cassandra's heart dropped into her stomach. Adrien's hand froze mid-air, his smirk fading into shock. The king of the room had just been dethroned by the queen he thought he destroyed. Elena didn't glance at Adrien. Not yet. Instead, she glided through the crowd, every step measured, every gaze drawn to her. Victor Blackwell walked just a step behind her, his protective presence declaring silently, "This woman is untouchable." Guests whispered furiously, "She's a Sinclair? She looks incredible." Adrien said she was finished. And at the center of it all, Adrien sat frozen, Cassandra trembling beside him as Elena approached the stage. The orchestra faltered, the spotlight shifted, and the room held its breath, because everyone knew the moment of reckoning had finally arrived. The room froze as Elena Sinclair, once Elena Carter, made her way across the marble floor. The green silk of her gown flowed behind her like a river of power, her every step slow, deliberate, calculated. The ballroom, filled with the richest and most influential people in the city, suddenly felt smaller, as though it were bending to her presence. Adrien Carter sat stiff at his table, his hand gripping his glass so tightly it threatened to shatter. Cassandra Val's smile was frozen in place, but her eyes flickered with panic. Neither had prepared for this. To them, Elena was supposed to be a ghost, a shadow buried in humiliation. But here she was, alive, radiant, untouchable, and worse, stronger than ever. Gasps and whispers swirled through the crowd. "She's a Sinclair? My God, she looks magnificent." Adrien said she was unstable. Every word was a dagger slicing through Adrien's carefully crafted lies. The host of the gala, clearly stunned, rushed forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he stammered, "please welcome Elena Sinclair, heiress of the Sinclair legacy." The announcement thundered through the ballroom like a cannon blast. Elena smiled faintly, her chin lifted. She didn't need the microphone. Her presence alone commanded the room. But when she spoke, her voice was calm, clear, and steady. "Thank you for welcoming me tonight. I wasn't sure if I belonged here anymore, but then I remembered. I was born for this." The crowd erupted in applause. Flashes of cameras blinded Adrien, who sat sweating under the spotlight that was no longer his. Elena's eyes swept the room, landing finally on Adrien and Cassandra. Her gaze didn't falter. It wasn't angry, it wasn't desperate, it was something far more dangerous. It was absolute control. Adrien's smirk wavered, but he forced a laugh. He clapped slowly, mocking. "Well, look who decided to join us. Elena, I didn't know you still had the strength to show your face." Cassandra leaned in, whispering, "Adrien, stop," but he ignored her. Elena tilted her head, her smile widening just slightly. "Strength?" she repeated, her tone cutting. "You wouldn't recognize it if it stood in front of you." The ballroom went silent. The tension snapped like glass underfoot. Victor Blackwell stepped forward, his commanding presence reinforcing her words. "For those who haven't heard the truth, let me be clear. Elena Sinclair is not a ghost. She is not a rumor. She is the majority shareholder of Sinclair Holdings, and starting tonight, she reclaims her rightful place." The crowd gasped again. Journalists scribbled furiously, cameras flashed endlessly, and investors whispered, calculating new loyalties in real time. Adrien's face drained of color. His empire had always been built on smoke and mirrors, on charm, manipulation, and the illusion of control. But now the spotlight had shifted, and the truth he thought would never surface stood in front of him, elegant and unstoppable. Cassandra shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She could feel eyes on her, could hear whispers questioning who she was, why Adrien had flaunted her while hiding Elena. The humiliation she had once savored giving to Elena was now circling back to her. Elena didn't need to raise her voice. She simply turned her gaze directly at Adrien, her smile serene, her words slicing sharper than any blade. "You once told me I was nothing without you," she said softly, but every ear in the room caught it. "But tonight, Adrien, you'll learn what it feels like to be nothing without me." The crowd gasped, the cameras flashed, and Adrien's carefully built world began to tremble, because Elena had just declared war in front of everyone. The ballroom was electric, buzzing with whispers, eyes darting between Elena Sinclair and the man who once called her his wife. Adrien Carter had never looked so rattled. His jaw clenched, his knuckles white against his glass, his smirk struggling to survive beneath the weight of Elena's return. Cassandra Vale shifted beside him, her silver gown glistening under the lights, but her confidence was unraveling. For the first time since she'd become Adrien's mistress, she felt exposed. The attention that once belonged to her had evaporated, swallowed by Elena's commanding presence. Elena stood tall, her smile calm, her gaze unwavering. The crowd leaned in, waiting for the explosion they knew was coming. Adrien forced a laugh, his voice ringing too loud, too desperate. "Let's not get carried away. Elena may have the Sinclair name, but she's no businesswoman. She couldn't handle being a wife. How could she handle an empire?" Some guests chuckled nervously, but many stayed silent. Adrien's words no longer carried the same power. His mockery sounded hollow against Elena's steady grace. Elena tilted her head, her eyes glinting. "You're right, Adrien," she said softly, but her tone was sharp enough to cut. "I couldn't handle being your wife, but handling an empire that I was born for." The crowd erupted in murmurs, some gasping, others nodding with admiration. Adrien's face flushed. Cassandra quickly stepped in, her voice sugary sweet. "Elena, dear, we all admire your courage, but really isn't this a little dramatic? Adrien has moved on, and so have you. Why dredge up the past when the future is so bright?" Elena's eyes flicked to Cassandra, her smile tightening. "Bright? Is that what you call being paraded like an accessory? I suppose it shines until the light turns on the truth." The guests hissed under their breath. Cameras flashed furiously. Cassandra's smile faltered, her eyes darting nervously. Adrien slammed his glass onto the table, the sound echoing. "Enough. You think walking in here with a new dress and a family name makes you powerful? You're still the same fragile woman who begged me not to leave her. Don't forget that, Elena. You begged." The words hung heavy in the air. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. Elena didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped closer to the table, her voice low but strong enough to silence the room. "Yes, Adrien," she admitted, her gaze burning into his. "I begged once. I begged you to stay. I begged you to choose love over pride, and you chose pride. That was the last time I ever begged for anything." The room fell into stunned silence. Cassandra's hand slipped from Adrien's arm. His face twisted, struggling to maintain composure as Elena's words cut through every lie he had built. Victor Blackwell's deep voice carried across the ballroom. "Mr. Carter, you should know something. The world has no patience for men who mock women they've destroyed. Tonight isn't about your charm, or your mistress, or your lies. It's about truth. And Elena Sinclair is the truth." The crowd broke into applause, the sound crashing over Adrien like a tidal wave. Cassandra shrank into her seat, the humiliation she once enjoyed giving to Elena now choking her. Adrien's eyes locked on Elena, his voice seething through clenched teeth. "You think you've won? This isn't over." Elena leaned closer, her smile serene. "No, Adrien," she whispered, loud enough for the cameras to catch. "It's just beginning." The applause had barely settled when Victor Blackwell stepped forward. His presence was magnetic, his tall frame and commanding aura silencing the restless whispers. He joined Elena at the center of the ballroom, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, not as a claim, but as a symbol of protection. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor began, his voice deep and steady, "tonight is not just another gala. Tonight marks the return of a name, a legacy, and a leader that too many of you have forgotten or never knew." Every eye was on him, every ear straining to catch his words. Adrien shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his jaw tightening. Cassandra gripped her champagne glass so hard her knuckles turned white. Victor raised a hand toward Elena. "This woman standing beside me is not merely Adrien Carter's ex-wife. She is Elena Sinclair, the sole heiress of the Sinclair fortune, majority shareholder of Sinclair Holdings, the rightful leader of an empire that has touched every corner of this city, this country, and beyond. Tonight, she reclaims her place." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Cameras exploded in flashes. The whispers grew louder, feeding like wildfire through the crowd. "Sinclair?" one man muttered. "She owns Sinclair Holdings?" another gasped. "My God, she's worth billions." Adrien's face drained of color, though he fought to maintain his smirk. "This is ridiculous," he barked, standing from his chair. "She's bluffing. Elena doesn't have the skill, the backbone, or the brains to lead anything. She's using Blackwell to play dress-up. That's all this is, a charade." But Victor didn't even look at him. Instead, he pulled a folder from his inside pocket and handed it to the host. "For those who need proof, here it is. Legal documents confirming Elena Sinclair as majority shareholder. Stock certificates, signed and sealed. This is not theater, Adrien. This is fact." The host scanned the papers, his eyes widening before he turned back to the microphone. "It's true," he announced. "The Sinclair empire is hers." The ballroom erupted into cheers and applause. Some investors clapped eagerly, already calculating how quickly they could align themselves with Elena. Others simply stared in awe at the woman who had once been dismissed as fragile, now standing revealed as untouchable. Cassandra's face paled. She glanced at Adrien, but he didn't meet her eyes. He was too busy fuming, his fists clenched at his sides, his empire of lies collapsing around him. Elena remained calm, her smile controlled, her posture unyielding. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't vengeful, at least not yet. She was simply standing in the power that was always hers, the power Adrien had tried to bury. Victor's voice carried once more. Adrien Carter told the city Elena was nothing without him. But tonight proves the opposite. He is nothing without her. And soon, everyone will see just how hollow his power truly is. The applause thundered again, louder than before. Guests rose to their feet, toasting Elena, chanting her name. To Elena Sinclair, Adrien's face twisted in rage, his voice barely audible beneath the cheers. This isn't over. She'll regret this. Elena's eyes locked on his across the ballroom, her smile cool and unwavering. No, Adrien, she whispered under her breath, though she knew he could read her lips. You will. By the next morning, Elena Sinclair's face was everywhere. Every major newspaper splashed her across the front page. The heiress returns. From broken wife to billion-dollar powerhouse, Elena Sinclair dethrones Adrien Carter in one night. Talk shows dissected her stunning entrance at the Unity Gala, playing clips on loop of her words that silenced the ballroom. Sometimes the women you think will crawl are the ones who will make you kneel. Hosts marveled at her composure, her elegance, her shocking reveal as the heiress of Sinclair Holdings. The internet exploded. Social media hashtags trended globally. Elena Sinclair, the real heiress, kneel Adrien. Millions watched and re-watched the videos, cheering for the woman who had risen from humiliation to triumph. Comment sections overflowed. She's the definition of strength. Adrien really fumbled the bag. Look at her now. Justice served. Every woman watching is proud of her. Elena, once mocked as fragile, was now a symbol of resilience. She became the face of empowerment overnight. But for Adrien Carter, the morning was a nightmare. He woke to find his reputation shredded. Headlines mocked him mercilessly, from mogul to fool. Adrien Carter humiliated by ex-wife Heiress, the man who mocked a billionaire without knowing it. Business channels replayed footage of his frozen face as Elena entered the gala, commentators ridiculing his arrogance. Investors began withdrawing support, their trust shaken. Stock prices of his company dipped sharply, a sign that his empire was crumbling faster than he could control. Cassandra Vale wasn't spared either. Tabloids tore her apart, branding her the Mistress dethroned. Photos of her shocked expression at the gala were plastered everywhere, with captions like, "The other woman loses her shine." Her once glamorous image was now overshadowed by whispers of her desperation to cling to Adrien's fading power. Inside Adrien's penthouse, chaos reigned. He hurled his phone across the room, shattering it against the wall. "They're treating me like a joke," he roared. Cassandra flinched, her hands trembling as she scrolled through the headlines. "Adrien, we need to fix this," she whispered. "She's not just your ex-wife anymore, she's untouchable." Adrien spun on her, his eyes blazing. "No, she's not untouchable. She thinks one dramatic entrance makes her queen? She's nothing without Blackwell. She doesn't know the games I play. I'll destroy her." But even as he said it, his voice wavered. Deep down, Adrien knew the balance of power had shifted. Meanwhile, Elena sat in Victor Blackwell's office, scrolling through the avalanche of media coverage. Her name, her image, her story, everywhere. She should have felt vindicated, even joyful. Instead, she felt the weight of what came next. "Enjoy the moment," Victor told her, pouring her a cup of coffee. "The world is with you now, but this is only the beginning. Adrien will strike back. He won't go down quietly." Elena nodded, her eyes steady. "Let him try. He built his empire on lies. All I have to do is shine a light." Victor smirked. "Then let's give him nowhere to hide." Across the city, Adrien made his first desperate move, calling a press conference to set the record straight. He planned to paint Elena as unstable, a woman using her father's wealth to play pretend. But what Adrien didn't know was that someone very close to him was about to betray him and hand Elena the weapon she needed to end him once and for all. Cassandra Vale had always believed she was clever. She had played the role of the alluring mistress flawlessly, wrapping herself around Adrien Carter's arm like fine silk. For years, she thought she had won the game. She had stolen a husband, secured luxury, and risen from obscurity into the glittering world of the wealthy. But now, as she sat alone in Adrien's penthouse, staring at headline after headline mocking them both, she realized the truth. She had backed the wrong man. Her phone buzzed again, that same anonymous number flashing across the screen. The message was simple: "Meet me." Midnight, the conservatory. Come alone. She hesitated. Her instincts told her it was dangerous, but her fear of staying with Adrien was greater. For weeks, she had noticed cracks in his facade, his temper growing sharper, his business deals failing, his confidence twisting into desperation, and the way he had looked at Elena during the gala. Cassandra knew. She was no longer his prize. She was his liability. So she went. The conservatory was quiet at midnight, its glass ceiling reflecting the city lights above. Cassandra walked in, her heels clicking nervously against the marble floor. She half expected Adrien to appear from the shadows, enraged. Instead, it was Victor Blackwell who stepped forward, his presence calm but powerful. "I knew you'd come," Victor said evenly. Cassandra stiffened. "If Adrien finds out—" "He won't," Victor interrupted. "Not if you want to survive what's coming." Her chest tightened. "Why me?" Victor studied her with sharp eyes. "Because you know his secrets. Because you've seen the deals, the lies, the corruption. And because deep down, Cassandra, you're tired of being his pawn." The words struck deeper than she expected. She thought she had been the player, but in reality, Adrien had always been the one moving the pieces. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. Victor leaned closer. "Evidence. Adrien's financial fraud, his embezzlement, his bribes. You've seen the papers. You've heard the calls. Bring them to me, and I'll make sure Elena crushes him. And in return, you walk away with your freedom, untouched." Cassandra's hands trembled. Betray Adrien? The thought terrified her, but staying with him terrified her more. She had seen the violence in his eyes when things didn't go his way. She had felt his grip tighten around her wrist, his words slicing at her dignity. She knew how quickly he could turn on her. She swallowed hard. "If I do this, he'll destroy me." Victor's expression softened slightly. "No, Cassandra, if you don't do this, he already has." For a long moment, she stood frozen, torn between fear and survival. Finally, she nodded. "I'll get you what you need." Victor's voice was steady. "Then Adrien Carter's reign ends sooner than he thinks." That night, Cassandra returned to the penthouse. Adrien was drunk, ranting at the television coverage of Elena's triumph. He didn't notice the way Cassandra slipped into his office, her fingers shaking as she opened his locked drawer. Inside, she found what Victor had promised. Documents of offshore accounts, falsified contracts, and payments that could ruin Adrien in seconds. She photographed everything, her heart pounding. Then she slipped the phone back into her purse and returned to bed, lying awake beside Adrien's drunken form. For the first time in years, Cassandra Vale felt powerful, not as Adrien's mistress, but as the woman who held the key to his destruction. What she didn't know was that Adrien, even in his drunken haze, had seen the flicker of light from his office. And suspicion was already creeping into his mind. Morning sunlight poured into Elena's penthouse as Victor Blackwell placed a sleek folder on the coffee table. Elena, still in her silk robe, sipped her coffee with cautious eyes. "What's this?" she asked. Victor opened the folder. Inside were photographs, bank statements, contracts, all damning. "Cassandra delivered," he said simply. Elena leaned forward, her heart pounding as she scanned the evidence. Offshore accounts siphoning millions, bribes to secure contracts, false reports to shareholders. Adrien's empire wasn't built on brilliance, it was built on theft. Her breath caught. "He's been stealing from his own investors." Victor nodded. "And laundering the money through shell companies. It's all here, enough to ruin him completely." Elena closed the folder slowly, her fingers trembling. For years, Adrien had mocked her as weak, fragile, worthless. But here in her hands was proof of his true weakness. His arrogance had always been his mask. Beneath it, he was a criminal. "This will destroy him," Victor said, his tone firm. "But Elena, it has to be you who brings it forward. If I expose him, it looks like a corporate war. If you expose him, it becomes justice." Elena swallowed hard. Justice. The word tasted strange on her tongue. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was about truth, about dignity, about every woman who had been laughed at, dismissed, or broken. Meanwhile, Adrien's world was already cracking. At his office downtown, he stormed into the boardroom, slamming the morning paper onto the table. The headline screamed, "Adrien Carter under fire, whispers of fraud." His board members sat in tense silence, their faces pale. "Gentlemen," Adrien barked, "this is nothing but rumors spread by Elena and Blackwell. Don't tell me you're foolish enough to believe it." But the men avoided his gaze. One finally spoke. Adrien, investors are pulling out. Stock prices are down 18% in 2 days. We can't afford another scandal. Adrien's jaw tightened. I'll handle it. Just give me time. Another board member cleared his throat. Time isn't on our side. The SEC is already sniffing around. If there's truth to these allegations... Enough, Adrien shouted, pounding the table. There is no truth. Elena is playing dress-up with Blackwell's money. That's all this is, and if any of you think she's capable of taking me down, you're more pathetic than she is. But the words rang hollow. Even Adrien could feel it. The boardroom that once bowed to his confidence now looked at him with suspicion. Back in the penthouse, Elena stood before the mirror, holding her father's letter in one hand and the folder of Adrien's crimes in the other. Her reflection stared back. Not the broken wife she once was, but a woman carrying the weight of an empire. Victor approached, his voice quiet. Are you ready? Elena met her own gaze in the mirror. Her eyes were no longer soft with fear. They were sharp with resolve. I'm ready, she whispered. That afternoon, she contacted her lawyer. Together, they prepared a press conference. Not just a statement, but a revelation. Documents, evidence, and witnesses. The kind of truth that would burn Adrien's carefully constructed empire to ash. But as she planned her strike, Adrien sat in his office, staring at a single thought that refused to leave his mind. Cassandra. She had been restless, secretive, and last night he swore he saw a flicker of light from his office. And just like that, suspicion turned to rage, because Adrien Carter was beginning to realize that the betrayal that would end him wasn't coming from the outside. It was coming from within his own walls. The press conference was held in the grand hall of the Sinclair Tower, the very heart of Elena's empire. Rows of reporters filled the space, cameras flashing, microphones angled toward the podium where Elena would soon stand. The anticipation was electric. Rumors had already swirled that Adrien Carter's empire was built on lies, and tonight the world would know the truth. Elena stood in the wings, her heart steady. Victor Blackwell stood beside her, offering a firm nod. This is your moment, Elena. Once you step out there, the world will see not the woman Adrien tried to destroy, but the heiress who destroyed him. She stepped onto the stage, the lights blinding, but the applause roaring. For the first time, she didn't shy away from the attention. She embraced it. Good evening, she began, her voice calm but commanding. For years, I was known only as Adrien Carter's wife. I was painted as weak, unstable, broken. But tonight, I stand before you not as his victim, but as Elena Sinclair, the rightful heir to Sinclair Holdings. And I am here to tell you the truth. Gasps rippled through the audience. Adrien, watching from his office with Cassandra at his side, leapt to his feet. She wouldn't dare, he muttered, but his voice shook. Elena opened the folder on the podium and held up the documents. Adrien Carter's empire was built on fraud. These are records of offshore accounts, falsified contracts, and bribes paid to secure his so-called success. He didn't rise because of brilliance. He rose because of theft. And now the truth will bring him down. Reporters erupted in questions, cameras clicking furiously. Screens lit up across the city as the broadcast went live. Adrien's crimes were no longer whispers, they were facts, exposed for the world to see. At Carter Enterprises headquarters, chaos exploded. Investors pulled out instantly. Phones rang off the hook. Board members resigned on the spot. Stock prices plummeted within minutes, free-falling like a crashing plane. In the boardroom, Adrien's men turned on him. You lied to us, one shouted. You ruined us, another roared. Security guards entered, removing Adrien's nameplate from the table. Adrien slammed his fists on the desk. This is all lies. Elena's trying to destroy me. But even as he shouted, his voice sounded hollow, pathetic. Meanwhile, Cassandra sat frozen, her heart racing. She had delivered the evidence, but she hadn't expected the destruction to be this fast, this absolute. Adrien's empire was collapsing in real time, and she was watching the man she once clung to disintegrate before her eyes. Elena closed the press conference with words that echoed across the world. No woman should ever be silenced, humiliated, or erased. Adrien Carter tried to bury me, but he forgot one truth. You cannot bury a woman who was born to rise. The hall erupted into thunderous applause, reporters shouting her name. Elena walked off the stage, her heart steady, her steps strong. She had done it. Back at the penthouse, Adrien staggered, sweat dripping down his forehead, his empire reduced to ashes. She'll pay for this, he hissed. But Cassandra, standing quietly by the window, whispered to herself, "No, Adrien, you already did." And in that moment, Adrien Carter realized the one thing more devastating than losing his empire was losing the people he thought would never betray him. The press conference had ended hours ago, but the city still pulsed with Elena Sinclair's name. Her words played on every news channel, her image splashed across every screen. Headlines no longer called her a ghost, a weak wife, or a discarded woman. She was now the heiress who rose. Yet, as Elena stood on the balcony of her penthouse that night, the applause of the world felt distant. The city lights glittered below, but her eyes were filled with tears, not of shame, not of humiliation, but of something she had thought she would never feel again. Freedom. She gripped the railing, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. For so long, she had carried the weight of Adrien's cruelty, the pain of losing her child, the humiliation of being mocked before society. She had buried her voice, silenced her worth, convinced herself she was powerless. But tonight, all of that shattered. Her tears spilled freely, hot against her cheeks, but they no longer came from despair. They came from release. Every sob that shook her shoulders was a piece of grief finally leaving her body. Every tear a wound that was beginning to heal. Victor Blackwell stepped out onto the balcony, his footsteps quiet. He didn't speak at first. He simply placed a glass of water beside her and leaned against the railing, giving her space. After a moment, Elena whispered, her voice breaking, "I thought I'd never survive him. I thought he had destroyed me forever." Victor looked at her, his expression steady. "He almost did. But you refused to stay buried. That's what makes you different, Elena." You rose. She turned to him, her eyes shimmering. "I don't feel like a queen or an heiress. I feel raw, like I've been torn open." Victor nodded. "That's what survival feels like at first, but it's also what freedom feels like. You don't need to be perfect, Elena. You just need to be real. And tonight, the world saw the real you." Her lips trembled into a small, fragile smile. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as Adrien's wife, not even as Sinclair's heiress, but as Elena. She thought of her mother, of the quiet life they had shared before the world of money and betrayal swallowed her whole. She thought of her father, who had left her the empire not to cage her, but to protect her. She thought of the child she had lost, a grief that would never vanish, but one that no longer defined her. Her voice grew steadier. "I don't just want to live, Victor. I want to build something, something that proves I wasn't broken for nothing." Victor's gaze softened, pride flickering in his eyes. "Then build it. Not for Adrien, not for the press, for yourself, for every woman who has ever been told she was nothing." The words struck her deeply, and more tears spilled, but this time they were tears of purpose. Elena lifted her chin, wiping her cheeks with trembling hands. For years, Adrien Carter had controlled her narrative. But tonight, she had taken it back. And as she stood under the night sky, tears drying on her face, she felt the beginnings of peace. What she didn't know was that her story wasn't finished yet, for someone was about to arrive at her door with news that would change everything once more. The knock on Elena's penthouse door came softly, almost hesitant, as the city still buzzed with her triumph. She wiped the last traces of tears from her cheeks, straightened her gown, and opened the door to find a man she hadn't seen in years. Dr. Graham, her late father's trusted physician. His silver hair was neatly combed, his eyes heavy with a secret he had carried too long. "Elena," he said gently, "I need to speak with you. It's about the child." Her breath caught, her fingers clutched the doorframe as the world tilted beneath her. "The child?" she whispered. "You mean my baby?" Dr. Graham stepped inside, his voice low. "Your father knew what Adrien was forcing you into. He arranged for me to intervene. That night at the hospital, I could not, in good conscience, end the life inside you. I secured the pregnancy in secret, and with your father's support, the child was delivered safely months later. Elena, your baby is alive." The words shattered her. Tears flooded her eyes as her knees buckled, and Victor rushed forward to steady her. "Alive?" she gasped, her voice breaking into sobs. "All this time, I thought I lost everything." Dr. Graham nodded. "Your father placed the child in protective care until the time was right. He feared Adrien would use the baby as a pawn. But now, with Adrien exposed, it is safe to bring the child home." Victor's arm tightened around her as Elena's sobs turned into cries of joy. The grief that had haunted her for years dissolved into a light she hadn't felt since before Adrien's betrayal. Hours later, at a quiet estate outside the city, Elena walked into a nursery. A nanny stepped forward, holding a small boy with dark hair and wide, curious eyes. The moment Elena's gaze met his, the world stopped. She reached out with trembling arms, and the child leaned into her, resting his tiny head against her shoulder, as though he had known her all along. Her tears fell freely, soaking his hair. "My son," she whispered. "My beautiful boy. I thought I lost you, but you were never gone. You were waiting for me." Victor stood nearby, his expression softened with something rare, hope. "He's your legacy, Elena. Not the empire, not the fortune. This child is proof that even in the darkest betrayal, life finds a way to rise again." Meanwhile, Adrien Carter's ruin was complete. His companies had crumbled, his investors abandoned him, and the authorities closed in. Alone in a dim apartment, stripped of wealth and power, he replayed Elena's words at the gala like a curse. "You will kneel." And for the first time in his life, Adrien understood what it meant to be powerless. Cassandra Vale had vanished from his side, her betrayal now public knowledge. No one would save him. No one cared to. But Elena didn't waste another thought on Adrien. Her story was no longer about him. Standing in the nursery, cradling her son, she finally felt whole. The empire was hers, but more importantly, so was her freedom, her dignity, and her future. Later, as she stood on the balcony of Sinclair Tower, the city lights stretching endlessly before her, Elena addressed a sea of cameras one final time. "I was told I was nothing. I was told I would crawl. But tonight, I stand here with my son, my family's legacy, and my own strength. Let this be a message to every woman. You are never powerless. You are never worthless. And no man has the right to decide your value. Rise, because the world belongs to those who refuse to kneel." The crowd erupted into thunderous applause, tears streaming down faces across the city. And as Elena Sinclair held her son high, the woman once broken became the symbol of unshakable power, love, and redemption. So our story has finally come to an end. And if you're still here with me right now, my dear friends, it means something in Elena's journey touched your heart in a way you can't ignore. Maybe it reminded you of a time you felt broken. Maybe it gave you hope that no pain lasts forever. Life, as the Stoics remind us, is not about avoiding hardship, but about how we rise after it. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That is what Elena discovered. She was humiliated, betrayed, crushed, yet she stood again, not because life spared her, but because she chose to rise. And perhaps that's the lesson we can carry. No betrayal, no cruelty, no storm can erase our true worth. We cannot control what others do to us, but we can control how we answer. Healing begins the moment we decide we are more than our pain. If this story moved you, if it sparked something deep inside, then don't just keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to join us for more journeys of strength and redemption.